Well, in what could be one of the biggest aviation deals in India, Tata Sons is eyeing debt-ridden Jet Airways, and the conglomerate's board could discuss the deal tomorrow. The Jet Airways stock soared on the back of reports that suggest that this deal could, in fact, gather momentum. Investors are pinning their hopes on Tatas stepping in to revive the airline. Sources tell CNBC TV 18 that Chairman N. Chandrasekaran is batting for the deal, but Chairman Emeritus Ratan Tata does have some reservations. Sources also tell CNBC TV 18 that if the Tata Sons board gives the go-ahead for the deal tomorrow, then it may move quickly. What we understand is that the Tatas may also explore the option of picking up the assets of Jet Airways and not the entire company. So all of this is in the realm of discussion. Sources tell us that the government is keen on the deal going through, as it does not want another full-service airline to go down. So will the Tatas board Jet Airways, and what could a potential merger mean for Indian aviation? To discuss those questions, joining us are experts who track the sector very closely. Kapil Kaul of the Centre for Asia Pacific Aviation, or CAPA; Mark Martin, the founder and CEO of Martin Consulting; Ajay Otani, founder and editor of Live from a Lounge, and aviation expert Devesh Agarwal. Gentlemen, appreciate you joining us here on the program. Ajay, let me start by asking you, because you've just put out your column for CNBCTV18.com, and your headline is "Why It Is Too Soon to Celebrate a Takeover of Jet Airways by the Tatas," that the to-do list for an airline merger is really huge. But before we get into the intricacies of a possible deal, the first reaction on the possibility of the Tatas boarding Jet.
I think nobody woke up 6 months back thinking that a deal like this would be possible, and now they're moving. Tatas are moving in really fast. That their aviation aspirations have been there for many decades is not a secret. And they're coming in as a white knight to save Jet Airways is actually a good thing for the Tatas as well as Jet Airways. Those are my first thoughts. But like I said, and you will most people will read it tomorrow, it's gonna take years and years to make this to work. It's not gonna be waking up one fine morning, signing the check, and it's a done deal.
Yeah.
So that's my thought.
No, and we haven't actually seen these deals work very well in the Indian aviation space at all, but we'll get to that in just a second. Let me go across to Kapil Kaul from CAPA. Kapil, what choice does Naresh Agarwal have at this point in time? Because what we are given to understand that for this deal to go through, the Tatas have virtually made it clear that they would like complete control, and they would like either Mr. Goyal's role to be for a limited period, if not at all. So in this situation, that's really the big question. Naresh Goyal, if he stays on, then will this deal go through? And if his role is going to be limited, perhaps for a limited period of 3 to 5 years, maybe there is hope that this deal goes through. What's your first take on what could be the big imponderables ahead of the discussions tomorrow?
Well, first of all, Shreen, good evening. Number one, we believe that consolidation is in fact inevitable, and I think if it happens in this form, it'll be good for Jet. I will treat it positive for Jet, and I think it'll be positive for Tatas as well. The deal has to be structured; it has to be made win-win for both. Those are the steps that the two companies will take. But I think it's a very positive. It'll be directionally positive for the sector. When you look at Jet Tatas, I can't think that without a change of ownership, an acquisition is possible. And I don't really see a 3 to 5 year tenure that they would want Mr. Goyal to stay for 3 to 5 years. I doubt whether that would be the case. If the acquisition takes place, it has to be a complete takeover. It may be possible till the merger is complete and milestones of the merger are achieved, that the current promoter and the management needs to stay on board. But I think it will be much quicker than the 3 to 5 years that you had suggested. So if it has to happen, I think the change of ownership has to happen. And if the change of ownership has to happen, then the Mr. Goyal staying in the entity would be limited for a short time.
Devesh, let me come to you now because, I remember my last conversation with N. Chandrasekharan, and we were discussing the Tata's aspirations for being in the aviation business. And he was very clear that, look, this is a low multiple business, and unless you have size and scale, you will always remain a fringe player. So in that sense, Jet gives them the size and scale, and it also fulfills the international aspiration that Vistara has always had. And, because of the 5/20 regulation earlier, and then because of a cash situation, they haven't been able to exercise that option just yet. So from a strategic fit perspective, do you believe that this transaction makes most sense for the Tatas as well as for Jet?
Oh, it absolutely does. You see, basically, if you look at what's happening is that Indigo has got a massive war chest, so they are able to sort of play the pricing game and absorb losses, which Jet, because of its high levels of debt, cannot. So Jet desperately needs cash, and the Tatas, or rather Vistara, desperately needs slots, which Jet brings at all major Indian airports, but most especially slot-constrained Mumbai. They essentially are a very dominant player at Mumbai. They also bring slots at international destinations like Hong Kong and Heathrow, London Heathrow, which are very difficult to obtain. So from that perspective, and if you also look from a fleet mix perspective, Jet Airways has been, deferring deliveries of its Boeing 787-9 order for quite some time, and this is the same aircraft that the Tatas, Vistara selected for its international operations. So from a fleet and network perspective, the fit is definitely there. As Ajay pointed out, it is going to play, it is going to require a time. There is going to be, it is a long-term sort of this thing, the merger between the two airlines to get the absolute synergies. Luckily, Jet, if you see, had and still has a good soft product. The cabin product is still very, in terms of, the crew service and all that. So it's, it sort of goes hand in hand with Vistara, which is very focused on the passenger experience. It's a very sort of revenue-driven experience versus a cost-driven experience at Jet. And so that way, it is definitely easier, so to speak, for Vistara to acquire Jet and possibly absorb it. Do they retain the Jet brand? I doubt it. They'll probably stay with the Vistara brand, but it is a few years away.
Okay, it is still a few years away if indeed the transaction does go through. Mark, let me ask you what you make of it. And also in terms of, valuations, this is likely to be an all-stock deal if it does in fact go through, if this merger were to be given board approval by both Jet as well as the Tata Sons. And the effort is likely to be to try and minimize the cash payout. So, both in terms of strategic fit as well as the operational contours of the transaction, what's your estimation?
Good evening, Shireen. Thanks for having me today. I think to kickstart, we need to understand what is the Tatas acquiring. It's not just Jet Airways. They're actually getting two airlines here. It's Jet Airways and Jet Light, which used to be Sahara at one time. So by the acquisition, we're looking at a combined market share, which should be possibly comparable to Air India. So in terms of the pecking order, we're looking at Air India, Vistara, Jet Airways, and the rest, So the significance of the deal, I think, has to be realized. It's not just a plain vanilla Jet Airways. It's a Jet Airways with Jet Light, Jet Connect, and also their MRO and their facilities if they choose options to acquire. With respect to Naresh Goyal, I believe Naresh should stick around because, eventually we got to understand that Etihad will have to, somebody has to buy off Etihad's stake. And clearly, Naresh is obviously, the good part of the deal is Tata who's going to be acquiring and buying off that equity. And we all know Etihad is not going to sell for anything less than 450, 500 rupees a share because that's the price they acquired it at. Coming up on where we are in terms of total value, I think the whole deal value itself is, we did some, again, rough sketch on a sheet of paper. We were looking at about 3,500 to 4,000 CR at least for the deal. But again, it's anyone's guess because if you look at not just their network, we're also looking at their capability and their whole region when it comes to operating in India and out of India. Because let's face it, they are the oldest airline, at least from a domestic perspective. So there are lots of positives here, and I believe that. This is going to be a good part for Vistara because let's face it, Vistara has had a challenge with trying to figure out what their product is in the market. They've been trying to toy around with an LCC model, an FSC model. They've been looking at a value plus, economy plus. So, this will kind of bring in that sense of perspective and where they want to go. And I think it should work very well for SIA as well from a longer standpoint, because I think we know very clearly Tata and SIA are in for the long haul. And Tata, when they pick up an investment, like the investments of the past, like VSNL, they're looking at an ROI of 30 to 40 years. They're not looking at a short sell.
Sure. Oh, absolutely. Let me, in fact, take that point across to each of you on the panel. And Kapil, I don't know if you've done any rough calculations on what the transaction could involve just in terms of deal value. But for the perspective of our viewers, and we've got those graphics running, an indication of what Jet offers as part of this deal. 124 aircraft. They do about 600 flights every day. They've flown about 30 million passengers in FY18. They've got code-sharing agreements with about 20 other carriers. So any estimation on the deal value, deal size, Kapil, that you may have done?
No, we haven't, not something that I can disclose on to you right now. But my sense would be that the value proposition that Jet would bring to Vistara and the dynamic of the integration would be substantial. It will move them from one extreme to the other extreme and bring a tremendous relevance to Tata's airline operations. So I think, without getting into specifics of the deal, I believe that the acquisition would be extremely positive for both the companies. And the size and scale it gives is going to be something that will almost be a step change. So I think from the perspective of acquisition, and this is the critical rationale for this merger, is that it gives the size and scale, it gives a step change, and a combination, a combined entity could be substantially bigger than what it is. What is more important, I think the Tata Singapore Airlines has Singapore Airlines as a partner. They are specialists in airline, and they could turn around this pretty quickly, especially the international operations. So I think they have the intellectual capital and the financial capital to make it work. The size and scale makes the airline operations of Tata extremely relevant, and I think it will be a win-win for them. So I think from the perspective of Jet and as well as Tata, I think there is a strategic rationale to make this work.
Speaking of synergies and, again, strategic fit, let me come to you, Ajay. Both in terms of network as well as the airline compatibility, what could be the win-win with these two coming together?
I think, both are full-service airlines, but there will be choices that will have to be made. First part, they both have good relationships with the individual players. Jet Airways is a big Boeing operator. Vistara is a big Airbus operator. So I think one choice that they will have to make over a period of time is, are they going to run fleets of both carriers, both airframe manufacturers, or they're going to stick to one, is a choice that they'll have to make. But coming to the product, it's good that it's in their blood, in both the operations that they have, like Devesh said, they're both full-service carriers, but full service means different things to Vistara and different things to Jet Airways. So they will have to come to a common ground on that. For instance, for Jet, it's the preferred choice of corporate travelers for various reasons. One is the network that they have. The second part that works very well for Jet customers is the Jet Privilege program. So, and that's one thing that has worked for Jet, even when the soft product has been sort of inconsistent over the past 4 or 5 years. So some days, But for Vistara, the soft, the soft aspects, that the fact that an airport manager can change your flight if you missed a flight, a lot of it's built on a very good customer experience and not on a very, but they're still, as of now, a fringe player in the industry. So I think once they combine, there will be a lot of good coming for the customers of Jet and Vistara if they make the right choices.
Absolutely. Look at the comparison there. 4.4 million passengers in FY18 for Vistara versus 30 million for Jet, and a market share of under 4% for Vistara. Devesh, this is something that we've picked up as well, and other reports seem to suggest that one of the options that could perhaps be considered by the Tatas could be that instead of picking up the entire company, they may look at assets, picking up assets. So it could be, the airline, the leases, the pilots, the slots. I mean, traditionally, what have you seen in other such transactions? How likely is that, and how would that work?
Yeah, you are very correct. In fact, I was going to point out that this is, I guess, a point where I would probably disagree with Mark a little bit. I do not see somebody wanting to acquire the Jet Light, operator's permit. Jet Light has got too much debt on it, and it doesn't have any significant operations. So it is altogether possible and probably a little more likely that the Tatas would like to acquire, Jet Airways domestic, Jet Airways international, and let Mr. Goyal deal with, Jet Regional, which is the ATR fleet, and Jet Light. Coming to the aircraft, what Ajay was saying, you see, we keep thinking of Vistara as an Airbus, sort of carrier. The recent deal of 50 aircraft that they signed, only 13 of them were actually confirmed. 37 of them, of those A320neos, are dry leases. So Vistara can walk away from it. And if we look at Singapore Airlines, it has switched over completely to the Boeing 737. They're getting out of the A320 fleet. So I see actually a synergy going forward where Vistara can move to an all-Boeing fleet, and they have the engineering support of Singapore Airlines behind them because Singapore Airlines is already operating the MAX. And so from that standpoint of fleet, this and the what you said, taking the assets, the question is how soon the deal will happen. Now, you see, if one looks at it, it would behoove the longer, the deal gets stretched out, probably the valuation gets, diluted more. I don't know. I mean,
exactly.
So it is in the interests, I guess, of the Tatas to, stretch the deal out, and also exactly what Ajay said. And let's not overlook the Tatas as a group. See, Jet Airways currently is what? At right around 16.5%, 17% market share. Vistara is 4% market share. So they instantly become the number 2 player in the market. And they have the sort of financial muscle, and exactly what I think Ajay and Mark were saying, that the Tatas are known for taking a very long-term strategic view. And so one can expect, they are looking at a 20-year window. For Singapore Airlines, they bring in, more slots into London Heathrow. And let's face it, the kangaroo route, from Australia through Singapore and over India to London is still a very profitable route for carriers. And going forward, let's face it, it's India and China that are going to bring passengers to the air. The rest of the countries are just sort of saturating out. The growth is not there. And talking about China, just today, there was one tumultuous thing that China Southern is going to leave SkyTeam. I mean, there is a lot of interesting things happening in the world of aviation today.
Happening around the world. No, you're absolutely right. There's a lot of interesting developments around the world, but I'll come to Mark in just a bit to respond to the point that you made as well. Yes, Mark, I'm coming to you on the point that Devesh was making as well, that they may, in fact, not want to deal with Jet Light at all. They're interested in the international operations and the domestic operations, and perhaps that might be the way that they will go. And it's an interesting point that Devesh highlighted there, that we could, if this merger were to go through, then the choice that they would go with would probably be Boeing, because that was the point that Ajay had talked about choices between Boeing and Airbus. But Mark, go ahead.
Hi, Shireen. Well, I'm going to differ with Devesh because Jetlight's P&L is Jet Airways' P&L. Okay, so if Jetlight has liability and debt and losses, it obviously is going to show up on Jet Airways. You might have two different AOCs, but that really doesn't matter. That's just that's a compliance issue. Okay. Now coming up to the point that that was raised on fleet, we got to understand, it's inconsequential at the fleet that we're looking at, because Singapore Airlines is in effect 4 airlines. It's Tiger Air, Silk Air, Fly Scoot, and Singapore Airlines, and they have a combined fleet of Airbus and Boeing collectively. And I think we also have to be, we've got to pick up a data reference point, and couple was in Sahara way back in the day, I remember, and at that time when Jet Airways was around, this was 99, 2000, 2001, Jet was pretty clear that their maintenance was going over straight to SIA engineering for the 737. So, I think we also got to be very clear that the historic relationship of Jet Airways and Naresh Goyal in the market dates back to the 1990s. There's one thing that Naresh stands out with is his extremely good relations and goodwill that he shares with the industry. And the second part that I want to highlight and flag here is that we're looking at, this really isn't a rescue effort. I think somewhere at the back of everyone's mind, Tata's a step forward, and they're looking at this as a long-term strategic play, which, of course, let's be clear, they've got AirAsia at a minority stake. They've got Vistara at a minority stake. They get in Jet Airways. Jet Connect is really, it's just a brand. It doesn't really connect with anything. Jet Connect is a brand per se, and Jet Light is just an airline with an AOC and a brand, which was a subset. Now, all of this come as one. And we're looking at flight rights, bilaterals, code share. We're looking at, his existing relationship with, of course, Etihad, KLM. And I think Ajay mentioned the whole part about the jet privilege. Yes and no. It's a great, it's reached critical mass, but I think eventually you want to sell tickets. So, and that's something which is what's going to really help them is their wide, their OTG network as well as their offline brick and mortar travel sales network, which Jet is probably the strongest, and they've built that network back in the back in the 90s. So I think eventually when this does roll out, maybe 24 months or 36, but we also got to be clear that Tata, when it acquires something, it fast tracks its acquisition. We're not looking at this going to 36, 48, 60 months. We're looking at we're predicting 18 months.
And Jet doesn't have that kind of time. It doesn't have that kind of time. They haven't been paying salaries to employees, so they don't have that kind of time.
Right, and they don't, and exactly. And as we've picked up the writing on the wall. They're looked at a fleet restructuring program. They're looking at acquiring some more debt. Lending is up. Sale and leaseback is on the cards. So clearly, I think all of these efforts go very well with SIA, and rightly put by Kapil when he said that. SIA, they know how to run an airline. I mean, they've been doing it since the 60s.
So, they do have the expertise and the experience. We're running out of time, so let me give each one of you wrap-up comments. Kapil, would you think that this is probably short of a done deal? This is as close as it is going to get for Naresh Goyal to be able to ink a deal, because all the talk around Delta, KLM, etc. doesn't seem to have materialized. Even the possibility of jet privilege being put on the block, that doesn't seem to have materialized either. So is this now or never now as far as Naresh Goyal is concerned?
To be frank with you, I think Mr. Goyal has a tremendous resilience. And that he has demonstrated for years. So whenever he's in a trouble, something, he manages to get out of it. Second, his company is still a very excellent brand. It's a great franchise. I think it's a better fit than Air India for any potential targets. So I think, but obviously it needs to be structured. It has to be, both parties have to make it work. I don't think it's a done deal. There are too many complexities in it. But I would think that the fact that he's very resilient and he has a good company, even though it's in trouble right now, its brand is good, and whatever was said just now. So I think from the perspective of Mr. Goyal, I would think at the end of the day, he would eventually have to opt out of Jet if this deal is to work out. But but it's too early to call whether it is it's finally going to happen.
Yeah. Absolutely. Ajay, final comment from you. What would be the key concerns that you would watch out for? What do you expect will be top of mind when the board meets tomorrow to take up this proposal?
I think the key question for everyone will be how to make this work. And given that Tatas have a very experienced team out there who've done many M&As, it's not going to be very difficult to structure this deal. You know, if what the media has it out there already, you know, if it's an all stocks swap deal and everyone becomes a shareholder in this combined entity to start with, Tatas can basically walk in on one day and take control of the airline. I mean, not one day as in overnight, but as soon as the process is done. And they can operate Jet Airways, Vistara under two separate AOCs for the time being. And like I've said before, the merger process is going to be very long, very painstaking. Perhaps people will have to be let go. A lot of things will happen. But that's a long-drawn process. But the fact that they need to immediately infuse cash, that can be done. And I think, you know, they can acquire control easily as long as Mr. Goyal and Etihad are playing ball. So those are two key,
and you know, we haven't spent time talking. We haven't spent time talking about Etihad, which does hold 24% in Jet, along with Naresh Goyal at 51%. Devesh, top of mind issues for the board tomorrow, you think?
Definitely, I agree with Kapil that this is a very, I mean, we are in the absolute preliminary stages, and any kind of speculation that all four of us are making, honestly, at this stage is exactly that. It's pure speculation. I also agree with him. Mr. Naresh Goyal has got many gambits. He's an incredibly shrewd business person. He can play the the airport operators. He can just turn around and say, "Hey, I'm not interested. I'll let Jet die." And everybody from the Ministry of Civil Aviation to the various airport operators are going to scream bloody murder at the potential loss of business, loss of jobs, and the political upheaval that it will cause with elections, so close. I think there are lots and lots of if and what ifs, and the potential scenarios are there. Definitely, Jet is a very good acquisition for the Tatas if done right. They of course would like Mr. Goyal and his family and obviously his close aides to exit. They would like a clean slate. Everybody is talking about Etihad. It is altogether possible that Etihad will continue to remain a minority shareholder because they will stand to earn. If anything, their investment will sort of appreciate once the Tatas take over and the market sort of reacts positively. So it's all, the Tatas can act as an intermediary and Delta can buy the share of Etihad. We know that Delta will not directly talk to Etihad because of the political compunctions that are going on with that Airlines for America kind of thing. And so there are a lot of wheels within wheels going on, and we really have to see things going forward.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Many wheels within wheels. It is never done till it's done. There is the first board meeting at a board level that this discussion will take place. And as I've been caveating, it's not as if the board will sign off on a deal. The board may, in fact, say, all right, go ahead with talks and negotiations. So that's perhaps at best what we can expect tomorrow, if anything at all. Jet Airways, of course, responding, saying that this is all in the realm of speculation. And it is till the time that it is done. But Ajay, Devesh Agarwal, Kapil Kaul and Mark Martin, I'm booking you for tomorrow, gentlemen, because we might have developments on this story. So it would be great to have you back here for an informed discussion on how we can take this story forward. Thanks very much for your time this evening. We'll see you again tomorrow. From all of us here for now, goodbye. Many thanks for watching.